So, as I said this morning, I'll say it again. Not only has it been a great privilege to work with the larger Global Alliance community, but it's been a tremendous honor to be able to lead with an incredibly professional staff team. You saw about half the team on the video, and just about everybody else on the rest of the team was behind the scenes, either making that video work, putting together storylines, or making this conference work. So it's a relatively small staff team. We will be expanding it, particularly on the technical development side over the next year or so. But I think for now, that was letting you see the work stream managers in action and technical manager. But the magic of Global Alliance is that we pair these incredibly dedicated professional staff with even more experienced volunteers who've got other jobs, and they chair our working groups, their work streams. They bring their expertise, their specialist knowledge to this discussion. And so as we move forward, we're actually going to now involve many of our great leaders from within that community, the work stream champions or the project, the sub leads of particular products. And we did it this morning with a different crew, maybe a couple of repeats, thank you. But I think this is our opportunity now as a group of 107 people to have a conversation with the experts who lead these work streams and have been intimately involved in making this work. We'll use Slido to generate the questions. I think Justina just tell him. And please go to get Slido up and running, ask your questions. If not, there are other ways. You can use chat, you can raise hands. But I would just ask the panelists now to switch on their videos and give a brief personal introduction. Tell us what you do and what you do when you're not at Global Alliance. And then hopefully by the time you've all done that in a very succinct way, we'll have some questions for you to answer. So, Brian, do you want to go first as a repeat back-to-back presenter?
Sure. Hi, I'm Brian O'Connor. I work at the Broad. I'm a co-lead on the cloud work stream and also FAST.
Okay. David, have you joined? I need to see who's here. Can't see if David's joined us yet.
I'm here.
Okay, David.
Hi, I'm David Burnick. I also work at the Broad. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer. That occupies a lot of my time. But with GA4GH, I'm very involved in the authentication specifications.
Okay, and I'll stick with David's. Other David.
I assume that's me, David Hanson. Hi everyone, I'm from Australia. I lead the Australian eHealth Research Centre, which is part of CSIRO, which is Australia's national science agency. So I co-lead the clinical and phenotype data capture workstream.
Okay, I'll stick in Australia. That's you, Oliver.
Oh, okay, I'm Oliver Hoffman. I'm head of bioinformatics at a Centre for Cancer Research in Melbourne. I do wear a hat with Australian Genomics together with David Hanson, and for this context, I co-lead with Thomas Keane, the large-scale genomics workstream.
Okay, we'll go to our colleagues in the US next. So, Jamie, doesn't look like you're in the US, but I guess you're just faking it.
I'm faking it. I'm pretending to be back in Paris. Yes, hello everyone. My name is Jamie Gidriavo. I am the director of the Office of Data Sharing for the National Cancer Institute with the NIH in the US. And for GA4GH, I am a co-lead of the Data Use and Researchers' Identities workstream.
Okay, Craig.
Hi there, I'm Craig Voisin. I work at Google on cloud products related to interoperability between clouds for identity and access management. And I'm a co-chair of a subgroup of DURI on the researcher identity side.
Okay, we'll stick in the US. So that's you with your official background, Bob.
Hi, I'm Bob Freemuth from Mayo Clinic. I work with the Center for Individualized Medicine, where I work on data representation for genomic standards and the integration of genomic data into electronic health record systems. I am the co-lead of the Genomic Knowledge Standards workstream with Andy Yates.
Okay, and now we'll go to our third David. That's you, David Glazer.
Hi, David Glazer. I co-lead the cloud workstream with Brian O'Connor.
All right, we'll finish with the Canadians. Mark.
Hi everyone, my name is Mark Fume. I'm CEO at DNA Stack, and as part of GA4GH, I co-lead the discovery workstream.
Okay, and Jan.
Hello, I'm Jan Joly from McGill University in Montreal, and I co-lead the regulatory and ethic workstream.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, that is your panel. They will answer all and every questions as complex as you want to make them. And let's switch to Slido and see how we're doing. If you haven't used Slido, you've got two choices. You can either ask a new question or you can upvote somebody else's questions, and that will drop it to the top, pull it to the top of my screen, and that will make it much easier for me to know which question to pick. This doesn't have a name attached to it, either sender or target. So I'll just throw it out for the group to answer. How can you make it easier for groups globally to adopt these standards? Who wants to take that one? Probably somebody who's involved in one of our implementation, demonstration type things.
Sure. I'll put my hands up first. I think this probably would have been a question for Jeremy, who was part of the presentation team earlier. I think the technical team that GA4GH is putting together will really help a lot with the adoption of those standards by making reference implementations available, improving documentation. So if you're interested in just some components in there, you can find a starting point and use them to adopt them to your needs.
Okay. The anonymous person just revealed herself. I think just to pick up on what Oliver said, part of our expansion of Global Alliance staff team, that very small team I talked about, is another 4 or 5 Jeremys who are our technical developer and a chief standards officer. And that team, when it's in place, and it'll probably take 6 months plus, there's Jeremy. When we got 5 Jeremys and a chief standards officer, that will really help us finish off the standards, the testing, the documentation, the compliance, and starting the reference implementation. So I think that's one answer, just to illustrate what Oliver was saying. I think the other side of it is the more implementations we can get, the more opportunities people have got to learn from those. And that leads us into the next question, which process to ensure interoperability on all these standards. That would sound like somebody who's equally involved in FASP. No pressure.
I'm happy to jump in here. So I do want to put a plug here for the FASP work. So in FASP, what we're trying to do is we're trying to demonstrate interoperability and learn from interoperability. And so a little plug for the next breakout session. We're gonna talk about these issues. But I think there's different ways of testing the interoperability, and we're demoing some, or we're showing some a little bit later today, where we're looking at multiple systems implementing the same APIs and showing that work can happen across those. We're looking at researchers being able to combine systems, use data from one system and another. So these are great ways of testing and ensuring interoperability among the systems that are implementing GA4GH APIs. And I would just do a thumbs up for more FASP work and more people jumping in on the FASP efforts here to help with that.
Yeah, and if those questions are of particular interest to you, I'd say look at the Connect demo, join the Connect demo, and you'll get a great deep dive into the work that's been done there. Next one's got Dury tagged on it. So that would suggest that a Dury person is going to answer that. Thank you, Jamie.
This is Jamie. I'll jump in here, and I am sorry that none of our Duo technical leads are on this call. I can say from my experience, I don't know of any systems specifically that would be working on Duo matching. However, there are multiple groups that are working on similar types of ontologies, and we are certainly working with them and trying to align with them to make sure that that process is happening as people work in real time. However, I'm not sure who asked the question, but if you could reach out to either Melissa or one of us directly, we would be happy to get some additional information specifically on how some of these systems are working on a technical level.
Yeah, I'd just like to add there that Duos and REMS are like full systems that would handle all kinds of use cases dealing with ethics, review, etc. So depending on the use case, I think would be interesting to explore when you do reach out to understand what your use case is. As you saw with the video, There are possible ways you could use Duo to help reduce your results on a search, for example, or there are ways you could use it in a more lightweight manner, but it really depends on the use case.
Okay. I saw a question that was in there earlier, which is what is FASP? People are texting what FASP is, basically what the acronym stands for, but more importantly, where I think Mark sent a link to where you can learn more about it at the top of the hour. That would also address the question of, do you have to use all standards? So I think what we've been in the strategic roadmap that Heidi Ream walked us through yesterday, there's a real imperative now that don't just keep pushing out more independent standards. Make your standards work better together. Make those standards easier to implement and start to get closer and closer to healthcare, which means working with things like HL7, HL7 Fire, and ISO. So the strategic imperative for the next 2 years is not just to produce more, better, great standards, but to really get at this issue of working together and being brought together. And that's very much what the Connect demos are there to show. You'll see that you don't have to use all of them. You can assemble enough of them to address your use case. Jamie, I'm going to throw that next one at you as well. You see that big NCI sitting in there?
Yeah, I'll start it, but I'll kick it off to Brian to help out a little bit here, which is, so the NIH is using something called RAS, which is the Researcher Authentication Service, and that is based 100% on GA4GH AAI specification and passport specification. And they're deep in it. It's being integrated. It's being used in what we call like a beta. Brian would know a little bit more about the details of where we are on it, but it's active and being used. Brian, do you want to say a little bit more about the GA4GH stuff within the NIH projects we work on?
Yeah, so I mean, there's an effort here, the NCPI effort, NIH Cloud Platforms Interoperability effort. And what that group is trying to do is trying to use GA4GH APIs across the NIH system. So things like Biodata Catalyst and Anvil, CRDC. For NCI in particular, we have, the University of Chicago has stood up DERS endpoints, right, for accessing GDC data. So that's really powerful to have that. David already mentioned RAS as it's being rolled out as a login, and we'll soon be supplying GA4GH passports for authorization purposes. So that's a development. And we're already seeing platforms like 7bridges and Terra supporting the TERS API for adding in workflows to those platforms and running those. So, I'm really excited to see the interoperability that's being fostered between the NIH stacks out there, and also within the NCI to see how you can leverage these GA4GH APIs in the sort of platform of your choice. Lots of good work happening there.
It not only has it given us a lot of feedback directly from people who are using it, but there hasn't been a lot of complaints, which I take as a big thumbs up to us.
Jamie, anything to add from an NCI perspective?
I just want to say thank you all for making that so much easier. No, I know in the interest of time, I will just add, those who are interested in looking at ways that various institutes across the NIH are looking at how to use specifically the Duo or data use ontology and or the Duo system, please check out the Dury in the real world, even if you just watch the videos later. We do have some real world examples of those in action.
Okay, David Glazer, would you like to have although Brian could do it or Mark could do it, do you want to use that question about cloud integration project and bring us your perspective?
Yeah, happy to. The short answer again is FASP, because that's where there'll be a much deeper update on the state of the project and how it's going. I think I would summarize it by saying that there are a few parallel kinds of integration going on, and all of them are making good progress and are well beyond the proof of concept stage, but not yet at the, oh, this is boring, let's do it 100 more times stage. So one is a horizontal integration, which is saying, let's show how we have multiple different stacks that can use the standards to do the same thing. So just do the same thing more than once, but in different implementations. Another is a vertical one that says, how can we stitch together as many APIs as possible and show one end-to-end of them all working, but working in a particular environment. And the other one, I don't have a third dimension between horizontal and vertical. The other one is actually using this to solve actual needs and requirements in real world cases, such as at the NCI, and say, hey, how do we pull together what set of standards help us solve this particular user-defined use case? All three of those are being worked on. You can get updates if you go to the or watch the recording of the FAST meeting. And like I said, they're all making good headway. They are very well succeeding at showing us what's easy, where we pat ourselves on the back, and much more usefully, what's hard, where we say, hey, here's what we need to work on next.
Okay. I'm going to switch gears away from the technical interoperability and bring to Jan this question of public trust, public confidence in sharing data, particularly that the question is phrased for commercial entities and progress with research industry. I will say before Jan answers that there were great presentations and some hard presentations, some tough challenges in our session yesterday afternoon. So if this is a particular area of interest, I would recommend look at track 1B recordings, and you'll see some great presentations. But Jan, over to you.
Yeah, sure. I think that in one word, it's all about good governance and securing trust, you know, and that's one thing we've been working a lot on at the Regulatory and Ethics Work Stream, is developing those kind of policies that if they're adopted by our driver projects and beyond, are going to make data sharing something in which the public will have confidence. So for example, consent policies to make sure that people understand exactly, you know, what are the requirements. If we all ask the same question and all use similar terms to explain projects and what people are required to do, much more easier to understand, less surprise for research participant. Same thing, we have confidentiality, security policy that we've developed, collaborating sometimes with other work stream. And again, if you show that you are doing the utmost to, in your data sharing process, protect the identity of the participant as much as it can be done, and also to foster transparency on what you're using as governance model, that's all conducive to more trust. And of course, we're hoping that commercial entities will be as interested, and so far that's what we've seen, in integrating some of these tools and policies to their other governance policies that they've already developed.
Jan, can you have a look at the question from Cassandra? It's titled Jamie and Anyone, but in this case, you're anyone and you've got a thing. And the question is, what do you feel is on the horizon for patient participant ownership of the data and for dynamic consent in that context? We'll come to you next, Jimmy, but Jan, can you continue on that vein?
Sure. These are fun questions, my God. So what's on the horizon for patient participant ownership of their data? I think that what we want is really have a collaborative and transparent partnership with patient and participant. Data ownership, I think the rules have to be clear in what people can expect on both ends. I think that if we start talking about ownership of data, we go to an extent where we can sometimes limit our capacity to do research and to share that data. So I do think we have to be very careful about some of the terminology, and we are also working on developing policies on intellectual property rights, and so dealing with some of these concepts to clarify things, because I think that we want to be very careful in where we advance on some of these concepts in order not to put additional hurdles for researcher and the research environment.
Okay. Jamie, anything to add?
Sure, I would just, from a practical standpoint, I think that when we're dealing with controlled access data, we really are doing it and allowing data use based on original consents. So from that standpoint, I do like to think that the participant is setting their own restrictions for data use. And as we move toward using the data use ontologies and incorporating some of those clauses into machine readable consents, then I think hopefully we can take what the patient intent is and be able to translate into something usable for downstream research in an encodable way.
Thank you. I'm going to, there's one question that's dropped off the screen, was from Larry Silvestri, and it was about what about aligning with IHE, Integrating Healthcare Enterprise? And then there is a new question coming on, can we elaborate how GA4GH standards will be coordinated across other standards working groups? So David Hansen, can you give us your perspective on getting closer and closer to healthcare initiatives? And they tend to be country specific, so that's a challenge for us. What you're doing in Australia is probably not what we're doing in Japan. And then Bob Freemuth, can you take the last question on getting closer to other standards groups? So David, then Bob.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. So IHE is an organisation which actually doesn't do their own standards, but tries to do demonstrators of how to use other standards to ensure interoperability of healthcare data. So it's really targeting that interoperability across different standards through demonstrators. So I don't think we'd necessarily look at competing with them. I think that it'd be great to have a discussion with IHE and looking at how we could use their demonstrators to potentially show genomics. And so they're a potential user of GA4GH standards and could really do a great job in helping us to integrate the GA4GH standard with the international kind of standards community in healthcare. So it's an interesting one. I don't know, Peter, if you or anyone's had discussions with IHE. I haven't around GA4GH, but
I actually haven't. I think every month we come across another group who's got deep experience or reach into a domain we're interested in, and our approach with all of them is that we're not going to duplicate and we're not going to compete. We want to align. Bob, can you just exemplify that?
Yep, before Bob does, I'll just say something very quickly about aligning with ISO and HL7. I just wanted to give Lindsay a shout out, who is helps us with the from the GA4GH team with the ClinPheno work stream, who's done a fabulous job in helping us get our heads around ISO in particular, but also HL7. So, but over to you, Bob.
Because it scrambled her head in the process of working through ISO, but she's recovering. We have a rehab program for her. Okay, Bob.
Thank you. I honestly, I did not write this question, although it's something that's very close to my heart. So thank you very much. This is a really important question, and it helps to exemplify how GA4GH is just one of many players in this space, and that in order to achieve that wonderful vision that we saw in the video, we need to be able to not only work within our own walls, but also be able to interoperate more effectively with standards that are produced outside of GA4GH. And so big players here include ISO and HL7, and of course there are others. GA4GH has recognized that this interoperability is necessary, and we have started partnering with groups, as Peter just mentioned. We actually have members of our secretariat now that are working with ISO, and I saw Bron Kinsler on the attendee list here, who is one of our representatives. I am a representative within HL7, so we have some overlap in membership, and we've been using that overlap in membership as a way of trying to keep some of the technical work in alignment in terms of goals and standards in sync with each other across these groups. Now that said, there's a lot more to be done, and I think as we continue to mature, not just as a single standards organization, but as a community trying to work together, we'll find more effective ways of doing this. And I would encourage anyone who is involved in an SDO activity outside of GA4GH, please bring your expertise to the table and help us to reach out to those other organizations and find ways that we can open up our standards and make them more compatible with what's out there.
Thank you. Mark, I'm coming to you next, but with a slight twist, because I'm going to take this question. Is there a list of what project or initiative has adopted which standards? So we're just in, Andrew and I and others are just in the process of a check-in with each one of the driver projects, and the 24 of them. And part of that is walking through what have you already, what did you help to develop and what are you implementing? But it gets broader than that. We've got many non-driver projects and now using Global Alliance standards, and it could be just one, it could be just regulatory, it could be jury standards, but many are top to bottom. But the other thing, and the reason I'm going to pass it off to Mark, is it's not just about projects or initiatives. We increasingly have got commercial enterprises and academic pipeline developers who are embedding Global Alliance standards across their entire performance. And when people acquire that process, whether it's from the Broad or it's from a company, they in fact wouldn't even know they're using a Global Alliance standard, but in fact it's been a key throughout. So Mark, do you just want to give us your perspective on that reach? And you're from a commercial company, but I think probably more than any other, you've been there from the beginning, or at least there's probably 3 or 4 companies that have been with us on this journey from the very beginning. So I think you've got a good perspective. Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I think for a second, I'll take off my GA4GH hat and put my DNA Stack hat on. We're a commercial company whose part of our mandate is to make these standards more accessible to the community. And I think as implementers, and I'm not just speaking for DNA Stack, probably many other partners of the Alliance, including cloud providers, I think the objective of us is to make these standards as accessible as possible, as easy to implement as possible, and as connected as possible. And so, I think as GA4GH matures, we're going to have more of these out-of-box implementations and integrations of them. And over time, just like adopting the internet, these standards are going to come embedded into products over time.
Okay, and with that comment, I would like to thank all panelists and all questioners. We're up to 116 participants right now. We'll move into the next session. I'm going to take back control of Justina's screen. So now we're going to, all right, rather I'm controlling it badly. So we're now, where's the breakout? Okay, so one editorial just before we move into the next session is you can join Global Alliance as an individual subscriber to all our information. You can be a very passive, listen and learn. You can become an organizational member, bring your organization with you. There are over 600 at the moment. Or you as an individual with expertise and with interest can join a work stream. So although most of our contributors come from our driver projects, you do not have to be associated with a driver project. So if you've got the interest, you've got the expertise, please join, and this slide tells you how and where to get involved. We're now going to go into breakouts. Angela's just chatted the Bitly links. You'll see the connection demos, which is probably half of what we just talked about in the last session. So if those questions were resonating with you, you want to know more about implementation, connectivity, multi-platforms, go to the connection demos. If you've got a deep interest in that crypt for GH that was mentioned in the video, another very distinct opportunity. And during the real world is about the data use and the research for identities. And if your interest is in regulatory and ethics, I'd suggest you go to that. These breakouts are a mix of recorded and live Q&As. And I would say they're going to last an hour. And then we're into a half-hour bio break. And please encourage everybody, go to your breakout, come back from your breakout, back into the main plenary session. The times should come up here. So if we've got our time conversions right, for me in EDT terms, I'm going to come back at 8:30 after I've attended one of these breakouts and probably had something to eat. So hopefully I will see you all back after the breakout and the breaks. Thank you.